Alright, so this lesson is going to be broken up into two parts. This lesson is called Gathering Assets, Getting Access to Free Resources to Help You Build Your Site. Now, in the previous lesson, what we did was take a sketch, which I have right here, labeled sketch, which is just basically a thumbnail sketch to help us plan out our site, and then we converted it into this Photoshop layout using vector shapes and rectangles and the type tool. And our next step is going to be adding some branding and some personality and some visual uniqueness to this layout through our gathering of assets. So the first part of this video is going to be the actual asset gathering process of going and getting images, Photoshop elements, typography, elements such as fonts and copy. And the second part of the video is going to be applying them to this layout. So without further delay, I'm just going to go through the different parts of this lesson. So the first topic that I touch on is fonts. Now, fonts are a great way to add a ton of personality to your site, and there's an entire field dedicated to this study called typography. And so I've listed several sites here that explain typography and what makes it so great and how you can become a great typographer. And below that, I have some resources that will provide you with free fonts that you can download and use. Now, some of them have various licensing based on the author's preference, whether it's just Creative Commons or if it's free to do whatever you want, or if you have to credit them. It's going to be slightly different for each one. So I'm just going to take you quickly through each of those sites. So the first one I've listed is defont.com. Now this is a great place to find all sorts of styles and fonts that people have just donated freely. So they have the most recent fonts listed here, but then if you go up, they have all sorts of categories listed to describe the fonts. So I tend to be a fan of, let's see, sans serif fonts. So under the basic category we have sans serif, and sans serif basically means without serifs, or without these little marks at the top and bottom of each letter. And so I find these to be a bit more elegant, a bit more minimalistic. Like, I really like these thin typefaces here. And the way you get it is just over to the right. They list first the type of availability it has. So this one, for example, is demo. So usually when it says that, they usually have several letters left out. So you typically won't be able to use the entire alphabet. There's others that just say free. So I really like the look of this one, so I'm going to go ahead and download it. So it's going to be slightly different on Windows, but for Mac, it's going to download a zip file. So you click on that, and it's going to show you in the Finder where that font is, and usually it'll be a .otf or a .ttf, and those are the two main font formats. So in a Mac, all you have to do is double click on it, and it's going to open up the font book application, and it's going to give you a preview of the font, and then you just click install font. And from that point forward, it is now available to use in any program, whether that's TextEdit or Word or Photoshop or Illustrator. And it will list it here in the list of all the fonts that are on your computer. Now, one thing I love about this program is you can create categories for your fonts. So I tend to collect quite a few fonts, and so if I'm creating a project and I need to choose a particular font in a certain category, it would take a long time to have to search through all these. So having a unique category over here really helps. Although it does take a little bit of time to build those categories, but once they're built, it makes it much easier. So to do that, I'm going to click the plus icon. I'm going to type sans serif. Now my category is built. I'm going to go back to all fonts and let's see, find Babus Noi. I'm going to just drag that into sans serif, and now that is part of this collection. So I can start using that. Now before I start using it, I'll just show you the other two sites real quick. So that's DeFont. The next one I have listed is Google Web Fonts, and it's just google.com/webfonts, one word. And they have 532 font families available to use for free. Now, the one advantage that this has over DeFont is they make it easy for you to install the fonts on your website so other people can see that. And this gets into a whole nother lesson, which is on the typography of web design and what fonts are considered web safe and what are not. And so if you want to learn more about that, go to that lesson. So I won't really get into that. But to download these fonts, you just go through, find your font. And by the way, Google Web Fonts tends to change their layout from time to time. So if you're watching this video way down the road, the layout may not be the same. So you'll just have to kind of be a little intuitive and figure out how to use the new layout. But they do have a nice filtering system over here. You can either search by word. There's one I really like. It's called, what is it called? I can't remember what it's called. But you can search, if you do remember, you can search for it that way. And then you can filter it by different categories. So serif, sans serif, display, handwriting. So you can uncheck these to narrow your selection, and you'll update this number up here. So let's say I really like this font right here. If I want to use it, I'm going to click Add to Collection. Shows it down here. And if I want to download it, there's a link up here that says Download Your Collection. So I'm going to click that. It will give me this warning, and it's just basically saying using it on your computer and using it on a website are two different processes, and they just want to let you know that. So the first one, I'm just going to click download, and that will download another zip file. I will click to open it. I will go back to my Finder, and what was the name of that one? Source Sans Pro. So here it is, and it gives me an entire family. And actually, I'm just going to describe that real quick. When you see a bold or italic font, there's two different ways that it does that. There's one that's called faux bold, and that's F-A-U-X, which means it's not the true authentic bold. It's the computer just adding thickness to the letters. And then there's true bolds, which is when the typographer actually creates an entirely new letter set showing the fonts at different thicknesses. And the same applies to italic. So that's why we have all these different font families or font styles. So I'm going to go ahead and double click that one, install it. Same deal as last time. You can add it to the category or whatever. And the last site is fontsquirrel.com. And it's similar to Google Web Fonts in that they make it easy for you to use these fonts on the web, although the process is a little bit more complicated. But if you're just using it in a design, you can download it pretty easily. So I'm just going to click download. And it's thinking, but the process is generally the same. You get the font you want, and some of them actually aren't free. As you'll see here, it says purchase the complete family. So that's another aspect to this site, is not all this stuff is free. They have stuff you can purchase. And actually it took me to the site Font Spring, which is a not so free website for fonts. Okay, so that's typography. So use fonts to give your site a different look or feel. And I'm just going to go into that a little bit more. If you're going for a more European or minimalistic or designy feel, you have these sans serif fonts, which can look pretty elegant. Depending on how you use them, you can use them in a non-elegant way. But if you're going for a rougher, more punk rock or street type feel, they have other styles, such as, let me see here, maybe a techno look, or if you want to go maybe trash, you have these really grungy looking kind of more teenager type fonts. So those might be better if you're doing a site for a skateboard company or for a rock band or hip hop group or something like that. You wouldn't necessarily use this for a mom and pop furniture store. Okay, so that's typography. The next aspect of type is copy. And copy is a word used in kind of the design and publication fields as just referring to the words or the verbiage you use in your site. So oftentimes you don't have copy for your site, so you have to put in filler text. So that's where lorem ipsum comes in. So I will explain that in a second. I'm going to go to lipsum.com, L-I-P-S-U-M, and they explain what is lorem ipsum. And it's basically a dummy filler Latin text that you can throw onto your site before you have copy, just to show how the type is going to look without people necessarily reading through your text and analyzing it and thinking that you're actually talking about your company. And so I think I explained that in the last video, but this is where you can get filler text. So if you want a certain number of paragraphs or words or bytes or lists, you put the number and then choose the radio box selection and then check whether or not you want it to start with lorem ipsum, and then you click generate, and then you can just go and copy and paste any of these text chunks into your layout. Now when it comes to creating real copy, you generally work with copywriters who are professional writers, and that's going to make a huge difference in how professional your site reads, because you have things like grammar and how intelligent you sound based on the words you use and how concisely and authentically you can convey the message of the company through the verbiage that you use. So that is copy. Now the next thing we have is using imagery. Now in the lesson here, I've listed a couple free sites that you can get free imagery from. The first one is Stock Exchange, and that's sxc.hu. So that can be a little confusing. And then there's Flickr, F-L-I-C-K-E-R, or no E, F-L-I-C-K-R.com. And let's see. For Stock Exchange, you actually need a membership, which it's free. So just take a couple minutes and sign up for an account, and you'll have access to all these high-res images. So the way you do that is clicking on sign up, go through the sign in process. So you'll create a login, a password, give them your email, probably uncheck these if you don't want to receive a bunch of junk mail. And then they do ask for your phone number and address, which if you're not comfortable with that, you can give them false information and it won't be a big deal. So since I do have a membership, I'm going to go ahead and sign in. Okay, so I'm signed in. So just do a search for whatever topic you're looking for. So let's say I'm doing a site for a Japanese restaurant, which I am at the moment. So I'm just going to do a search for sushi. And here are a bunch of free images of sushi I can use. So now they are sandwiched between images that are not free, and these come from iStock.photo, which this is kind of how I'm assuming this site gets their revenue, is through referral. What do you call it? Commission. So if someone clicks on one of these images and goes to iStock.photo and creates an account and ends up buying from them, Stock Exchange will probably get a cut of that. So that's how they're able to provide free stock images. And most likely their stock images are submitted for free. So I'm just going to click this one. Here's the photo, looks pretty nice. Click on it and it's going to download a high-res version, and I probably won't be able to see the whole thing because it's so high-res, but it looks really good. So I'm just going to right-click and save the image as. And now I have access to that image. So I would just go through and do a whole bunch of searches for images related to the topic I'm trying to gather assets for. So the other one was flickr.com, and you actually need a Yahoo Mail account here if you want to upload your own stuff. But to download other people's, I don't think you need an account. So if I do a sushi search again, then these are available here. So I would just click on one of these, and I would click the plus icon, and they have made it a little trickier to get access to some of these, so you do have to click on view all sizes, and then they have download the large 1024 size of this photo, and here it is. Now again, there are different levels of licensing that people have on here. Some people are okay if you use their images, other people would ask that you credit them, other people are not cool with it. So you just need to check on that before you use the images. So I'm going to click to open it, and it will open it in preview if I'm using a Mac. And here it is. So I'm free to use that image now. Now the last category, oh, I forgot colors. So if you want to learn about how to use colors, I do have a link to an article here that talks about color theory and the color wheel and terms like hue and saturation and value and lightness and complementary versus triad, those types of things. So definitely look through that. But if you want to have color combinations already provided for you, go to cooler.adobe.com. And here they have a bunch of user-submitted color schemes, which actually tend to be pretty good. So I'm not the biggest color theorist, so having this site available is really helpful for coming up with a color scheme. So let's say I want something kind of Japanesey, so I will search for Japan, and it will show results of colors people have submitted with that keyword in it. So this one actually looks pretty cool. So I'm going to click there, and here's that color combination. And if I want to get the details on these colors, I'm going to click this icon right here, and that brings up all sorts of options. But in the web, you want hexadecimal color code, and I can explain that in another lesson, but that is basically how the web encodes colors, is using these numbers. So it provides those numbers for each of these colors, and that's how you can quickly get a color scheme to base your site on. Now, I think, yes, lastly is Photoshop Elements. So I have a link here, creatica.com/freepstfiles/latest, and this site links to all sorts of different sites that will provide Photoshop elements that you can use freely. And again, each of these has a slightly different way in which you can access it. Some of them require that you tweet about them or create a Facebook post. Others require that you sign up for their email list. Others just, let's see, ask you to create an account with their site. Or some of them just give them away for free. So it just depends on what you're looking for. The one I went ahead and got was these social media icons, and they asked me to tweet about them. So since I have a Twitter account, I went ahead and did that, and they gave me access to the files. And that's generally it when gathering assets. So the next phase, we're going to be taking those assets and plugging them into this Photoshop layout. So by then I will have collected a bunch of assets. So hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you later.